Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? This lecture will be for Tuesday, May 4th. May 5th. It's actually Saturday, May 2nd right now, and it is an absolutely beautiful day. I hope you guys are getting outside and moving around a little bit and enjoying the weather. Hopefully, we will have nicer weather from here on through the summer and we can get out of our houses a little bit more as they will be gradually reopening things and we'll be getting back to some semblance of a normal life hopefully very soon. I hope you guys are all well and hanging in there. I hope your families are doing well. Um, Please pay attention to Google Classroom. I posted Zoom meetings for Monday at different times for each class. Um, and we are going to watch the opening scene to Saving Private Ryan, which is the Normandy invasion. It's America's official involvement in the war in Europe against the Germans and the Axis powers. So World War II. Now, America's involvement is 1941 to 1945 from Pearl Harbor on, but the actual military movement, let's say, of Germany is going to begin in 1936. Now let's look at this road to war. So remember, a couple different things in the backdrop here. We have a Great Depression going on that is worldwide. We have worldwide unemployment. We have a decrease in trade. Remember, I've always said that when we're making money together, we're not killing each other. Well, we're making less money with each other at this point in time. So naturally, there could be more killing. Um, Also, keep in mind the end of World War One, the Treaty of Versailles. It was very, very punitive towards Germany in the form of reparations and taking away land from them. So there has been a more widespread depression since really all through the 1920s into the 1930s. So the boom that a lot of the rest of the world had, or at least the developed world during the 1920s, Germany is not going to experience that. Their Weimar Republic is an absolute disaster. Inflation crippled the economy. And people, Germany was a once proud nation that was now reduced to not much at all. But let's go to Japan first. So Japan is going to invade Manchuria, China, in 1931. By 1937, they're going to move deeper into China, and they're looking for economic and military control of Asia. So Japan is trying to assert itself as the most dominant power in the Asian theater or the Asian rim. Okay, so Germany is going to be looking for power over Europe. Japan is going to be looking for power over Asia. And those are the two most powerful parts of this axis. So we all know Adolf Hitler. A lot of this you guys already learned in Global 10, so I won't go on too long about it. So the situation in Germany is terrible from, the war forward. So they are now into a decade or two of economic depression, no sense of future or destiny, no pride in one's country, losing their national identity and their cultural identity. And Hitler is going to, and there's a tremendous amount of fear. Okay, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and Hitler is going to rise to power by seizing that fear and really being able to control the people and change their minds and kind of be able to control them through fear tactics. So he, I think, becomes chancellor in 33, and then they name him Führer in 35. He is the absolute leader of Germany. He is a fascist leader. He is far right wing. It's nationalism, pride and love of one's country above all else. It's militarism, that they will use the military in order to exude dominance over other countries. He wants to restore Germany to its former glory, okay? He wants to rearm the country, start to take back territory that they lost during World War I, and eventually take over all of Europe. Now, everything that he is going to do is going to be a violation of the Treaty of Versailles. But the official policy from Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviets is appeasement. We have a lot of problems going on in those countries already. We're not rushing off back to war when we have people on breadlines and 20% unemployment. So appeasement means you see it, you don't like it, but you allow it to go on because you either have other problems to deal with or you just simply don't want to go back to war. Remember, World War I ended in 1919. This is about 15 years later, this thing starts to kick up again. Okay, and we're going to start to see some of the problems of the end of World War I now reemerge and resurface during this beginning towards World War II. So Per the Treaty of Versailles, he is not allowed to build an army. What does he do? He builds an army. Does anybody do anything about it? No. Can they do something? Yes, they don't. 1936, he's going to send troops to occupy the Rhineland. Now, the Rhineland is an area that shares the border between Germany and France, and it had been a contested area from the Napoleonic Wars. So you're talking about back into the 17 and 1800s, the Germans and the French had been fighting over that piece of land. Now you have ethnic French people and ethnic German people, and Hitler's justification is going to be where anywhere there's Germanic speaking people or Germanic culture, that should be a part of this German empire that he is going to try to create. 1938, he wants to unite, like I said, all Europeans of German origin into one single empire. So there are Germanic-speaking people in Austria and the Sudetenland, which is part of modern-day Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic now. All right, and he is going to take those areas as well. Now, remember, these countries are ripe for the taking or these areas are, because there's a lot of pro-German people in there already. Okay, they weren't thrilled at the end of World War I that they were now annexed to a different country, and they have no problem being part of Germany. If Germany is going to take over and be the it power in Europe, they have no problem. So there's very little pushback against the Nazis and the German forces as they invade these areas. Again, is the world looking? Yes. Do they like it? No. Are they going to do anything about it? No. Now, part of this fascism is going to be a scapegoating of various groups that are unhuman or subhuman or less German or however you want to look at it. So obviously we all know about the German genocide against the Jews. The Jews were looked at as outsiders, as foreigners, as imposters, as potential communists. So they were going to be eradicated, and it's a progression, and we'll talk more about it as we go, but it isn't into death camps and concentration camps right off the bat. It's going to be a slow and steady progression towards limiting their rights, taking away their businesses and their property, removing them from their homes, forcing them into labor camps, and then eventually the final solution, which would be into the death or the concentration camps where they were murdered. It isn't just Jews that are going to be remained. Gypsy people, which were considered the Rohani, they called them. They were another subhuman, non-Aryan, non-white, non-Germanic looking group that Hitler blamed for their problems. So Hitler is going to blame the Soviets, the communists, the Jews. They're going to blame the newspapers, the journalists, the teachers, the college professors, the lawyers, the doctors. They really would go after the intelligentsia, which is the smarter people that hold the smarter jobs in society that might actually speak out against them. Because if you're looking for total control over your people, you can't have priests or teachers or journalists putting out negative information about what you are trying to do. This is total authoritarian control, total surveillance state. So they didn't want to imprison you. I mean, some of them were, but they would just shoot you. And that would be it. And they controlled everybody in that fashion. So Mussolini is going to rise up as a fascist leader in Italy, and Franco is going to rise up as the fascist leader in Spain. So this first picture here, that is of the supreme commander of the military. I think it's Tojo or Dojo in Japan. This is Emperor Hirohito, who actually lives until 1989. He's the longest lasting of Mussolini and Hitler, of the big three for the Axis powers, that actually lives beyond the war. Mussolini and Hitler do not make it out of the war. Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Il Duce they called him, and this is Franco in Spain. All right, so these are the leaders that are in charge of these countries and are going to form an alliance to reestablish. Remember, a lot of the backdrop of this is anti-Soviet communism. There is a fear that communism would take over these countries and they would lose their cultural identity. Wealthy corporate industrialists would lose their power over society, and the worker would take over. So this is going to be a big push against communism and blaming for the calamities that are going on in Europe. Now, isolationism. We just fought a world war. We've got a Great Depression going on. Britain, France, and the United States are going to take the policy that isolation is better. There was, if you remember, after World War One, the League of Nations does not get passed, which was the nations coming together to work together and talk about things rather than go to war. So we avoided another world war. So we didn't join the League of Nations. We said we're better off on our own. All right. And also part of isolationism is when you have breadlines and unemployment here in the country, you're not going to want to skip off to war and ignore the domestic problems that you have going on. So, and the other thing is this stuff's going on in Europe, 3,000 miles away, no commercial air. It's not like you can get over here in a couple of hours. So in the U.S., a lot of it was, hey, that's their problems. We already sent people and died during World War I, cost us a lot of money, cost us lives. There's an anti-immigration tone still going on in the country at this time. So, we don't want to get involved. You stay over there, we'll stay over here. Some in America, remember, there's a rampant fear of communism here. So if the Germans and the Italians and the Spanish were pushing against communism in Europe, that was a good thing for America. So if you were an anti-communist, you might actually be sympathetic to the idea of a Germany expansion as a counterweight to communist influence. All right. There's a lot of Germans here in America, and they're not so removed from either being born in Germany or their parents being born in Germany. So if Germany is going to be made great again and is going to expand their territories and their prominence in the world, you could argue that many of them saw that as a good thing. Also, the dollar, right? It always comes back to the money. So America's making money trading with Germany and Japan. Their economies are growing. They're buying American products. Why would you go to war with countries that are buying your products? Henry Ford has factories in Germany employing slave labor supplied by the Nazis. Many Americans think that involvement in World War I was a mistake. There was a report that came out that kind of muddied our justification, or Wilson's justification, for going to war with the Zimmerman telegram and the sinking of the Lusitania and freedom of the seas. And it showed that international bankers and arms exporters pressured Wilson to enter World War I. I don't know too much about the Nye report or its validity, but it caught on in the press, and it sort of blackened our entrance into World War I and prohibited us from, getting ready for this next war that was coming. So Congress is going to pass a series of neutrality acts during 1935. And if you remember, from George Washington forward, America's foreign policy, at least at first, is neutrality. We want to make money with everybody in trade, but in terms of the military, we don't want to be involved in Europe's problems. In 1796, in George Washington's farewell address, he said, beware of getting engaged in European entanglements. Okay, that's 150 years before this. We reluctantly got involved in World War I, and we are going to be on the same path here. It's not our problem, it's their problem. Let's trade. Let's support Britain and France, but let's also trade with the other side. And if you remember, that got us into trouble in World War I, and it's going to happen again here. But the official policy is either non-intervention or non-involvement, isolation, neutrality. Group those words all in the same thing. We are staying on our side of the pond, and we are going to mind our own business as much as possible. Now, war in Europe, all right? This is just a pattern of aggression that is going to continue. So, 36... he invades the Sudetenland, Germany. 36 is the Rhineland. 38 is parts of Czechoslovakia and Austria. 1938, they're going to create a Munich Agreement with Britain and France where they cave in to Hitler's aggression, and they basically say, hey, we're going to allow this to go on. Take back your Germanic, areas and make your borders a little bit bigger, but leave it at that. 1939, the Soviet Union is going to try to make a deal with Britain and France to stop the German expansion, but they are going to refuse, which is going to be a bit of a mistake. And Stalin, instead, is going to go to Germany and sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact, which would mean that the Soviets would get a piece of Poland, the Germans would get a piece of Poland. Now, Poland had been created by the Treaty of Versailles, all right? So they were going to basically kind of meet in the middle of Poland, and Poland is the country between the Soviet Union and Germany. So they are going to agree, they're going to form this Nazi-Soviet pact. And listen, they hate each other in terms of economic systems. Hitler was completely against the communists, but he, couldn't make a deal with Britain and France, so they're going to make a deal with the Soviets. So they're each going to invade Poland, but Germany is not going to stop. Germany is then going to push further and then eventually attack the Soviet Union, and that is going to start the Eastern Front to their war. So when the Germans invade Poland, that is now the straw that breaks the camel's back in terms of Britain and France. That is a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles, and they are going to declare war on Germany. So at that point, Hitler is then going to take Scandinavia, Belgium, the Netherlands, and he'll be in Paris by June of 1940. Just think about that. Paris is one of the biggest, most powerful cities in Europe, and he is able to take it by June of 1940. He walks right into the country with his military, and they just mow down the French and are able to take over their capital city. So it goes to show you how weak some of these countries were. And Germany is, even by today's standards, they are the top engineering economy, and I think the top economy in all of Europe. They can build things like none other. Okay, probably only second to America. So they're able to build sophisticated weapons in mass quantities very, very quickly, change the tone and rhetoric of the country by appealing to nationalism and a sense of returning to greatness. And it's the war machine that Hitler is able to build in a small amount of years is unbelievable. All right. And then just kind of domino effect takes over these countries as time goes into the 1940s. So at this point, Germany is going to join Italy and Japan in creating a military alliance known as the Axis, where they would support each other in these wars. Now, who's left? Britain. All right. Our oldest friend, our oldest ally. They are now standing alone, fighting the Germans and whoever else, with a possible Nazi invasion coming. Okay. I don't know that another country invaded England since the Vikings did in like the William the Conqueror days of the 1100s or the 12th century. Okay. They hadn't been invaded in 800 years. All right. And now, if Hitler is in the Netherlands and he's in France, he's at the shores. Okay. He's got a friend in Spain in Franco. He's got the Scandinavian countries north and east of Britain. And now he's got a full on monopoly, if you will, of the territory in Europe with all their guns pointing towards Britain. So now we're in 1940 and Britain is at full-on war defending themselves and trying to not be invaded by Nazi forces. So they are going to call on the new world to save the old. And this is got to be the official beginning of American rise to just complete global dominance, where Britain, who's the strongest country in the world, or at least always was, is now going to call on America and say, we will not be Britain anymore. We will be gone if you guys don't come over here and help us. Now, 1939, we are going to start to get on our pathway towards getting involved in this war. But again, we're going to want to be neutral. 1939, FDR and Congress pass a cash and carry policy of selling non-military goods to Britain and the Allies, food, oil, etc. So we are going to start to give them the things that they need to survive. And obviously that's going to be looked at by Germany as an act of aggression towards them. But we are not going to just leave them by themselves. We are going to help them with non-military goods. We'll talk about the Lend-Lease Act in a little bit. FDR is going to run for an unprecedented third term in 1940. Why is it important? It's never happened before. So George Washington sets the precedent of 2 terms. Every other president was 2 terms. Teddy Roosevelt, you can make an argument because he finished a term, ran for a term, skipped a term, and then ran again and lost for a term. So, that's sort of like 2.5 terms, I guess you could say, but he never wins the 1912 election, so it doesn't really matter. But FDR is going to win. In his first fireside chat, he tells the nation that we must be a great arsenal of democracy. So if you see that word arsenal, you see that he starts to use the rhetoric of war, providing Britain and France military aid to fight Germany and Japan. So first, it's food and oil, 1939. By 1941, all right, we are going to be involved with shipping weapons to the Allied forces. So in 1941, America becomes more aligned with those who are fighting Germany and Japan, and we do this through our Lend-Lease Act, which is where we funneled billions of dollars and arms to Britain and China and the Soviet Union, halted all trade with Japan, which stopped the sale of oil that was vital to Japan. And if you cut off oil from Japan, and that's their lifeline for their war, then they are going to look at as a hostile, aggressive act, and that is going to be the ultimate catalyst to Pearl Harbor and then our eventual involvement into this war. So it is beginning to become inevitable, and people are starting to realize that we are going to be involved in this war as things go on, as we ramp up our aid and then our military aid to these countries. And then once you stop trading oil to Japan, that is now a direct because if you think about it, the only thing that could really challenge Japan's dominance over Asia is the American West Coast. Okay, California is close enough to Asia where there can be influence and sway over what goes on there. All right, so American public opinion is going to shift to intervention from isolationism as the nation prepares for war. And let's end there. We'll start with Pearl Harbor for Wednesday. I try to keep this short and sweet. I'll throw some questions into the Ed puzzle. Continue to work on these guys. I mean, I think that this is working. It's a way for you to hear and see me. I'm going to come up with some other Flipgrid ideas for persuasive presentations for us to do as well. We're in the home stretch, all right? It's the first week of May. We're going till June 12th. We've got some days off around Ascension Thursday, Friday, and Memorial Day, so we'll be able to enjoy those. Remember, there's no finals, there's no regions. We will continue to take Google Form tests for our units, and we've got a lot of great stuff to talk about, and we'll also have time to mix in a lot of current day stuff, and there's a whole lot of craziness that we could be talking about and discussing and kind of putting into perspective based on what we've learned in history this year. So I'm looking forward to being with you guys for the rest of the year, and I hope you're all doing well. Thank you.